The coffee shop was overflowing when Brianna Torres accidentally grabbed the wrong order from the counter, not realizing the tall man beside her had been reaching for the exact same cup at the exact same moment. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, laughing as their fingers touched on the warm paper cup. She pulled back quickly, her cheeks flushing. The man smiled at her, his dark eyes crinkling at the corners, and for a moment she forgot how to breathe properly. "No harm done," he said, his voice deep and warm. "Though I think that might actually be mine. Vanilla latte with an extra shot." Brianna looked down at the cup in her hand and groaned. "That's what I ordered too. What are the odds? In a city of 8 million people. Pretty astronomical." He grinned, and she noticed the way his perfectly tailored suit fit his broad shoulders. Everything about him screamed money and confidence, from his expensive watch to his perfectly styled dark hair. "How about we both check the names?" They leaned in simultaneously to read the scribbled handwriting on the cups sitting on the counter. Both said, "VL extra shot," with no names attached. The barista had apparently given up on the naming system during the morning rush. "Well, this is awkward," Brianna said, biting her lip. "I really need the caffeine. I have a huge presentation at work in an hour and I'm running on about 3 hours of sleep." The man studied her for a moment, something unreadable flickering across his face. Then he reached past her and grabbed both cups. "Tell you what, you take both of these and I'll wait for them to make 2 more. Consider it my good deed for the day." "What? No, I couldn't possibly. I insist." He pressed both cups into her hands gently, his fingers warm against hers. "Good luck with your presentation. I hope you knock them dead." Before Brianna could protest further or even thank him properly, someone called out to him from the entrance of the coffee shop, and he was gone, disappearing into the crowd of morning commuters with a final smile thrown over his shoulder. She stood there for a moment, clutching both lattes, feeling oddly breathless. Then reality crashed back in as she checked her phone. She had 45 minutes to get across town to the offices of Hartman and Associates, the architectural firm where she worked as a junior designer. The presentation she'd been preparing for weeks was finally happening, and she could not afford to be late. Brianna made it with 7 minutes to spare, sliding into the conference room with her portfolio tucked under one arm and one of the lattes clutched in her hand. She'd given the other to Marcus, the intern who always looked half dead in the mornings. Her boss, Patricia Hartman, was already setting up the projector. "Cutting it close, Torres." "Sorry, Mrs. Hartman. Traffic was a nightmare." Brianna set down her coffee and pulled out her materials, trying to calm her racing heart. This presentation was her chance to prove she deserved the promotion to senior designer. She'd spent countless nights refining her vision for the new community center project, a building that would serve underprivileged kids in the Bronx. "The client should be here any minute," Patricia said, smoothing down her blazer. "He's a bit particular about his philanthropic projects, so make sure you emphasize the accessibility features and the community integration aspects." Brianna had thought they were presenting to a committee. "Yes, Nicholas Hayes. He's funding the entire project out of pocket. $20 million. Patricia's expression was serious. This could make or break the firm's reputation in the philanthropic architecture sector, so don't screw it up. Brianna's mouth went dry. Nicholas Hayes. She'd heard the name, of course everyone in New York had. The billionaire who'd made his fortune in sustainable manufacturing before the age of 30, then turned his attention to charitable endeavors. He was notoriously hands-on with his projects and had a reputation for being both brilliant and uncompromising. The door opened, and Patricia straightened up with her professional smile firmly in place. "Mr. Hayes, thank you so much for coming. We're excited to show you." Brianna turned around and nearly dropped her coffee. Standing in the doorway, looking just as surprised as she felt, was the man from the coffee shop. Their eyes met, and she watched recognition dawn on his face, followed by something that looked almost like amusement. He was even more imposing in the fluorescent light of the conference room, his presence seeming to fill the entire space. "Miss Torres, this is Nicholas Hayes," Patricia said, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "Mr. Hayes, this is Brianna Torres, the lead designer on the community center project." "Actually, we've already met," Nicholas said, his lips quirking up at the corners. "Sort of. The coffee shop this morning, right?" Yes," Brianna managed, trying to pull herself together. Oh God. The man who'd given her his coffee was the billionaire client she was supposed to impress. The universe had to be playing some kind of cosmic joke on her. "Thank you again for the coffee. That was very generous. You needed it more than I did." He moved into the room with easy confidence, pulling out a chair. "I'm looking forward to seeing this presentation. Patricia speaks very highly of your work." Brianna caught Patricia's surprised expression out of the corner of her eye. Her boss clearly hadn't expected them to know each other, even tangentially. "Right. Yes. Let me just pull up the slides." She forced herself into professional mode, channeling all her nervous energy into the presentation she'd prepared. As the lights dimmed and her first rendering appeared on the screen, she felt her confidence returning. This was her element. This was what she was good at. "The vision for the Hayes Community Center is to create a space that serves as both a sanctuary and a springboard," she began, her voice steadying as she moved through the slides. "We're incorporating natural light wherever possible, using sustainable materials, and designing flexible spaces that can adapt to the community's changing needs." She walked them through every detail: the gymnasium that could convert into an event space, the rooftop garden where kids could learn about urban agriculture, the library with floor-to-ceiling windows, the commercial kitchen for teaching culinary skills. She'd poured her heart into this design, imagining the lives it could change, the opportunities it could create. Nicholas didn't interrupt once, but she could feel his eyes on her the entire time, intense and focused. It was both unnerving and exhilarating. When she finished and the lights came back on, there was a moment of silence. "Well?" Patricia asked, her voice tight with anticipation. Nicholas leaned back in his chair, his gaze still fixed on Brianna. "It's extraordinary. You've thought of everything, not just the aesthetics, but the functionality, the community impact, the long-term sustainability. This is exactly what I wanted, better than I imagined, actually." Relief flooded through Brianna's body so fast she felt dizzy. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I'm glad it meets your expectations. Call me Nicholas," he said, standing up and extending his hand. "And it exceeds them. When can we break ground?" Patricia jumped in then, discussing timelines and contracts and budgets, but Brianna barely heard her. She was too busy trying to process the fact that she just successfully pitched to one of the most influential philanthropists in New York, and that he was the same man who'd bought her coffee that morning. When the meeting wrapped up, Nicholas turned to Brianna one more time. "I'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss some details. Just the two of us, if that's all right. I have some specific ideas about the programming spaces that I'd love your input on." "Of course," Brianna said, trying to ignore the way her pulse jumped. "Whatever works for your schedule." "How about dinner tomorrow night? We can talk through everything in a more relaxed setting." He pulled out his phone. "What's your number? I'll have my assistant send you the details." "Dinner with a billionaire." To discuss work, she reminded herself firmly, even as something fluttered in her chest. She rattled off her number and he typed it in with quick, efficient movements. "Perfect. I'll see you tomorrow, Brianna." The way he said her name, with that slight emphasis on the syllables, sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. After he left, Patricia turned to her with an expression somewhere between impressed and bewildered. "What happened at that coffee shop?" "Nothing. Literally nothing. There was a mix-up with our orders and he let me take both coffees." Brianna started gathering her materials, trying to act casual. That's it. Well, whatever it was, you made an impression. Nicholas Hayes doesn't usually request one-on-one meetings with designers. He typically works through me. Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly. Keep things professional, Torres. This project is too important. Of course, Brianna said quickly. Always. But as she left the conference room and headed back to her desk, she couldn't quite shake the memory of Nicholas's smile, or the way her heart had kicked up when he'd said her name. The restaurant Nicholas chose was the kind of place Brianna had only read about in magazines. The kind where you needed a reservation months in advance, and where the waiters probably earned more than she did. She'd agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a simple black dress that was professional enough for a work meeting but elegant enough that she wouldn't look completely out of place. Nicholas was already there when she arrived, seated at a private table in the corner with a view of the city lights stretching out below them. He stood when he saw her, and she noticed he'd traded his suit for dark jeans and a crisp white button-down with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Somehow he looked even more attractive this way, more relaxed and approachable. Brianna, thank you for coming. He pulled out her chair, and she tried not to read too much into the gentlemanly gesture. I hope this place is all right. The food is incredible, and it's quiet enough that we can actually hear each other think. It's beautiful, she said honestly, looking around at the understated elegance of the space. Everything was warm wood and soft lighting, intimate without being stuffy. They ordered drinks, wine for her, whiskey for him, and for a few minutes they made small talk about the weather and traffic, both of them seemingly aware that something hung unspoken in the air between them. So, Nicholas said finally, leaning forward with his forearms on the table. Let's address the elephant in the room. This was supposed to be a working dinner, but I have to be honest with you. That wasn't the only reason I asked you here. Brianna's breath caught. It wasn't. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the coffee shop. His dark eyes were intense, sincere. And then you walked into that conference room and completely blew me away with your presentation. Your passion, your vision, the way you think about space and community and impact, it's remarkable. You're remarkable. She should say something professional, something about maintaining boundaries, but the words stuck in her throat. I don't know what to say. You could tell me I'm crazy, or that you're not interested, or that mixing business and personal is a terrible idea. A smile tugged at his lips. Though I'm really hoping you don't say any of those things. I think you have the wrong person, she said, the words coming out in a rush. I'm just a junior designer who lives in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn and has student loans that will probably outlive me. You're Nicholas Hayes. You're on the Forbes list. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. His voice was quiet but firm. I want the woman who was running on 3 hours of sleep but still cared enough about her presentation to fight me for a coffee. I want the woman who designed a community center with the kind of heart and thoughtfulness that most people can't even conceive of. I want you, Brianna. You're the only right one. Her heart was thundering so hard she was sure he could hear it. You don't even know me. Then let me get to know you. That's what tonight is for, isn't it? Getting to know each other. He reached across the table, his hand palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. What do you say? Can we just see where this goes? Brianna looked at his hand, then up at his face. There was something so genuine in his expression, so open and hopeful, that her carefully constructed defenses started to crumble. She thought about Patricia's warning to keep things professional. She thought about how complicated this could get. She thought about all the very reasonable, rational reasons she should say no. Then she put her hand in his, feeling his fingers close, warm and secure around hers, and said, "Okay, yes." His smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. Yeah, she couldn't help but smile back. But we still need to talk about the community center. That project is important to me. It's important to me too. How about we do both? We can be professional about the project and still see where this thing between us leads. He squeezed her hand gently. I promise I'm very good at multitasking. They did talk about the community center, eventually. Nicholas had ideas about incorporating more mental health resources and after-school programs, and Brianna found herself sketching on napkins, both of them leaning over the table in excitement as they built on each other's concepts. But they also talked about other things: their families, their dreams, the paths that had led them to this moment. Brianna learned that Nicholas had grown up in Queens, the son of a factory worker and a nurse, and that his drive to succeed had come from watching his parents struggle to make ends meet. He'd put himself through MIT on scholarships and loans, started his first company in his dorm room, and never forgotten where he came from. That's why the philanthropy matters so much, he said, his expression serious. I got lucky. I had the right idea at the right time and I worked my ass off, but plenty of people work just as hard and never catch a break. If I can create opportunities for others, if I can level the playing field even a little bit, then the money means something. She told him about growing up in a tight-knit Puerto Rican family in the Bronx, about her parents who'd sacrificed everything to send her to college, about her little sister who was studying to be a teacher. She told him about falling in love with architecture as a kid, drawing elaborate buildings in the margins of her notebooks, dreaming of creating spaces that could make people's lives better. My parents wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, she admitted. Something practical and stable. They didn't understand why I wanted to design buildings, but they supported me anyway, even when it meant taking out loans and working extra shifts. They sound wonderful, Nicholas said warmly. I'd love to meet them sometime. The casual way he said it, as if meeting her parents was a given rather than a far-off possibility, made her stomach flip. You're getting ahead of yourself. This is still our first date. Is that what this is, a date? He grinned at her over the rim of his glass. I don't know, is it? She raised an eyebrow, challenging him. Definitely a date, he confirmed. One of the best I've ever had, actually. By the time they left the restaurant, Brianna felt like she was floating. Nicholas insisted on driving her home. He had a car service waiting and she didn't protest. In the back of the sleek black car, the city lights streaming past the windows, he took her hand again. Can I see you this weekend? He asked. No work talk, I promise, just us. I'd like that, she said, surprised by how much she meant it. 24 hours ago, she hadn't known Nicholas Hayes existed beyond his name in the papers. Now she couldn't imagine not seeing him again. When they pulled up outside her building, a modest brownstone walk-up that suddenly looked even shabbier next to his luxury car, he walked her to the door. Thank you for tonight, he said, standing close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. For taking a chance on me. Thank you for the coffee, she said softly. Both times. He laughed, that warm, rich sound that she was already growing addicted to. Then he leaned in slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. Good night, Brianna. She practically floated up the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, and when her roommate Sophie emerged from her bedroom with a questioning look, Brianna just grinned. You're going to think I'm crazy, she said, dropping her purse on the couch and kicking off her heels. Try me. So Brianna told her everything: the coffee shop, the presentation, the dinner. Sophie's eyes got progressively wider as the story unfolded. Wait. Nicholas Hayes. The Nicholas Hayes. The one who was on the cover of Time magazine last year. That's the one. And he told you that you're the only right one. Sophie let out a low whistle. Girl, that's like something out of a movie. I know. It's insane, right? I keep waiting to wake up. What are you going to wear on Saturday? Sophie was already pulling out her phone, presumably to search for date outfit ideas. I don't even know where we're going yet. Doesn't matter. We need to go shopping. You can't show up to date number 2 with a billionaire in your usual jeans and t-shirt. Brianna threw a pillow at her, but she was laughing. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt light, hopeful, like anything might be possible. Nicholas texted her the next morning. "Good morning. I can't stop thinking about last night. How do you feel about sailing?" She stared at the message for a solid 30 seconds before responding. "I've never been." "Is that a problem?" His reply came almost immediately, not even a little bit. "I'll teach you. Pick you up at 10 on Saturday." Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Brianna spent the next 2 days in a haze of work and anticipation, sketching out revised plans for the community center and replaying every moment of their dinner in her mind. Patricia noticed her distracted state but didn't comment, though she did raise an eyebrow when Nicholas's assistant called to coordinate construction timeline meetings. "Remember what I said," Patricia warned her on Friday afternoon. "Professional." "I'm being professional," Brianna protested. "You've been smiling at your phone for the past hour." "That's just my face." Patricia snorted but let it drop. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that made New York feel almost magical. Brianna had compromised on the outfit front, choosing white shorts and a blue striped top that Sophie insisted made her look nautical but sexy. She felt ridiculous spending so much time on her appearance, but she couldn't help wanting to look good for Nicholas. He picked her up right at 10 in a different car this time, something low and sleek and undoubtedly expensive. He was wearing khaki shorts and a navy polo, aviator sunglasses pushed up on his head, and he looked so good it should have been illegal. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked, opening the passenger door for her. "As ready as I'll ever be." They drove down to the marina, and Brianna tried not to gawk at the massive yachts lining the docks. Nicholas guided her past most of them to a beautiful sailing yacht that was impressive without being ostentatious. "This is yours?" she asked, taking in the gleaming wood and polished brass. "One of my few indulgences," he admitted. "My father loved sailing. He only got to do it a few times on borrowed boats or rentals, but he used to talk about it like it was the closest thing to flying. After he passed away a few years ago, I bought this boat in his memory, named it after him." She looked at the name painted on the hull, the Thomas Hayes. "That's beautiful, Nicholas. Come on, let me show you around." He helped her aboard, his hand steady on her lower back as she found her footing on the deck. The boat was stunning, all warm teak and crisp white canvas, with a small cabin below deck that managed to be cozy despite the luxury. Nicholas showed her how the sails worked, his hands sure and capable as he demonstrated the rigging. Then they cast off, and she watched in amazement as he guided the yacht out of the marina and into open water. "Want to take the wheel?" he asked once they were clear of the harbor. "Are you kidding? I'll crash us into something." "I won't let that happen. Come here." He positioned her in front of the wheel, then stepped close behind her, his arms coming around to cover her hands with his. "Feel that? The way the boat responds to the wind and the current. You have to work with them, not against them." Brianna was acutely aware of his body pressed against her back, his breath warm on her neck as he explained the basics of sailing. It was intimate and thrilling and slightly terrifying all at once. "I've got you," he murmured when she tensed up as the boat heeled in the wind. "Trust me." And somehow, impossibly, she did. She relaxed into his embrace, feeling the rhythm of the waves, the pull of the wind in the sails. For a little while she let herself forget about everything except this moment, the sun on her face, the salt spray in the air, Nicholas's solid presence at her back. They sailed for hours, cutting across the glittering water with Manhattan's skyline receding behind them. Nicholas had packed a picnic lunch, fancy sandwiches and fruit and champagne, and they ate on the deck, the boat anchored in a quiet spot where the city felt like a distant dream. "Can I ask you something?" Brianna said, lying back on the deck cushions and shielding her eyes from the sun. "Anything." "Why me? Really? You could date models or actresses or other billionaires. Why are you interested in me?" Nicholas was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Do you remember what you said in your presentation about how architecture should serve people, not ego? How the best buildings are the ones that disappear into the lives of the people who use them, that become part of their story rather than imposing a new one? Yeah, I remember. That's who you are. You don't perform or pretend or put on a show. You're authentic and passionate, and you care about things that matter. When I'm with you, I don't feel like Nicholas Hayes the billionaire. I just feel like myself. He reached over and laced his fingers through hers. That's incredibly rare. You're incredibly rare. Brianna's throat tightened with emotion. I feel the same way. Like I can just be myself around you. It's strange because we barely know each other, but also it doesn't feel strange at all. So we agree. This thing between us is worth exploring, definitely. He leaned over and kissed her then, really kissed her, his lips warm and sure against hers. Brianna's hands came up to frame his face, and she kissed him back with everything she had, tasting salt and champagne and possibility. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nicholas rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling for you, he said quietly. I know it's fast and probably crazy, but I needed you to know. It is fast, she agreed, and it is crazy, but I'm falling for you too. They sailed back to the marina as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Nicholas kept one hand on the wheel and one hand intertwined with Brianna's, and she thought she'd never felt more content in her entire life. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm. There were official meetings about the community center where they were scrupulously professional, and Patricia watched them like a hawk. And then there were their real lives, stolen moments between work obligations and family commitments and everything else that demanded their attention. Nicholas took her to museums and concerts, and tiny hole-in-the-wall restaurants in neighborhoods he'd loved as a kid. Brianna showed him her world, the bodega where she got her morning coffee, the park where she liked to sketch, the Sunday dinners at her parents' house where her mother insisted on feeding him enough food for a small army. Your family is incredible, Nicholas said one night, sprawled on Brianna's couch after a particularly boisterous dinner. Her little sister Carmen had interrogated him mercilessly about his intentions, and her father had made him watch old home videos, and through it all he'd been gracious and charming and genuinely engaged. They can be a lot, Brianna admitted, curling up against his side. They love you. That's not a lot, that's everything. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. My family's different, smaller, quieter. After my dad died and my mom moved to Florida, it's mostly just me and my brother. We see each other maybe once a month if we're lucky. I'd love to meet him. You will. He's going to love you. Nicholas pulled her closer. Everyone loves you. How could they not? There were challenges, of course. The press found out about them after a photographer caught them having dinner in Little Italy. And suddenly, Brianna's phone was blowing up with interview requests and gossip column mentions. She hated the attention, the way strangers felt entitled to comment on her life and her relationship, and whether she was pretty enough or successful enough to be with someone like Nicholas. Ignore them, Nicholas said firmly when she showed him some of the nastier comments. They don't know you. They don't know us. Their opinions don't matter. Easy for you to say, you're used to this. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. He took her phone and set it aside, then pulled her into his lap. Listen to me. You are brilliant and talented and beautiful. I'm the lucky one here. If anything, people should be questioning whether I'm good enough for you. That's ridiculous. Is it? He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. You make me want to be better, Brianna. You make me want to deserve you. She kissed him then, pouring all her feelings into it, trying to communicate what words couldn't quite capture. He met her passion with his own, his hands sliding into her hair, and for a while nothing else existed but the two of them. The community center project moved forward. They broke ground in July, and Brianna stood beside Nicholas in a hard hat that was slightly too big for her head, wielding a shovel for the ceremonial first dig. The local news covered it, and this time she didn't mind the cameras because the story was about the center and what it would mean for the community. "This building represents hope," Nicholas said in his speech, but his eyes were on Brianna. "It represents the belief that everyone deserves a chance to reach their potential, regardless of their circumstances. I'm honored to be a part of bringing this vision to life." Brianna's parents were there, and her sister, and Sophie, and even Patricia looked impressed. Afterward, her mother pulled her aside. "He's a good man, Mija," she said in Spanish, her eyes warm. "He looks at you like your father looks at me, like you're his whole world. Mama, it's only been a few months. Time doesn't matter when it's right. We knew your father and I from the beginning. You and Nicholas, it's the same." She patted Brianna's cheek. "Don't be afraid of it." But Brianna was afraid, at least a little. She was afraid of how much she'd come to depend on Nicholas, how thoroughly he'd woven himself into her life. She was afraid of what would happen if it all fell apart, if she woke up one day and realized this fairy tale couldn't survive in the real world. Those fears came to a head one night in August. She'd had a terrible day at work. A different project had fallen through. Patricia had been in a mood, and she'd gotten caught in a downpour on her way home and arrived at her apartment soaked and miserable. Nicholas had texted earlier asking if she wanted to have dinner, and she'd snapped back that she was busy. He showed up at her door anyway, carrying Thai takeout and wearing a concerned expression. "You said you were busy," she said, not moving aside to let him in. "You said you were busy." "I heard that you were upset. Those are different things." He held up the bag of food. "I brought pad thai and those spring rolls you like. Can I come in?" She wanted to say no, to hold onto her bad mood and her fear and push him away before he could get any deeper under her skin. But she was tired and hungry and she'd missed him, so she stepped back and let him in. Nicholas set the food on the counter and then turned to her, really looking at her. "What happened, sweetheart?" "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling vulnerable. "I just had a bad day. It's not a big deal." "It's a big deal if it's bothering you." He moved closer, slow and careful, like she was a skittish animal he didn't want to spook. "Talk to me." So she did. She told him about the failed project and Patricia's criticism, and the feeling that she was drowning in expectations from work, from her family, from the press, that seemed determined to scrutinize her every move. And then, because she apparently had no self-preservation instincts left, she told him what she was really afraid of. "I'm scared that this is too good to be true," she admitted, her voice small. "That I'm going to wake up one day, and you're going to realize I'm just some girl from the Bronx who doesn't belong in your world. And I'm scared because I've already fallen so hard for you that I don't know how I'd survive that." Nicholas was quiet for a long moment. Then he closed the distance between them and gathered her into his arms, holding her so tight she could feel his heartbeat against her cheek. "You're not just some girl from the Bronx," he said fiercely. "You're the woman I love, the woman I want to spend every day with for the rest of my life. And you belong in whatever world you choose to be in because you're smart and talented and strong enough to carve out your own space anywhere." Brianna pulled back to look up at him, her eyes wide. "You love me. Of course I love you. I think I've loved you since the moment you tried to steal my coffee." He smiled, but his eyes were serious. "I know it's fast. I know we haven't said it before, but I can't keep it in anymore. I love you, Brianna Torres, completely and absolutely." "I love you too," she whispered, and saying it felt like coming home. "I love you so much it terrifies me. Don't be terrified, be happy." He kissed her softly, sweetly, like she was precious and fragile. "We're going to be okay, better than okay, I promise." They ate their Thai food sitting on the floor of her tiny living room, and Nicholas told her stories from his early days of building his company, the failures and setbacks he'd faced. He talked about the fear of not being good enough, of losing everything, of letting people down. "But here's what I learned," he said, twirling noodles around his fork. The fear doesn't go away. You just decide that what you're reaching for is worth being scared for. And you, Brianna, you're worth every bit of fear and risk and uncertainty. She leaned over and kissed him, tasting peanut sauce and promise. You're worth it too. The summer melted into fall, and the community center began to take shape. Brianna was on site almost every day, overseeing the construction and making sure every detail matched her vision. Nicholas came by when he could, and she loved watching him interact with the construction workers, treating everyone with the same respect, regardless of their position. One afternoon in October, they stood together on what would eventually be the rooftop garden, looking out over the neighborhood spread below them. I keep thinking about all the kids who are going to use this space, Brianna said softly. All the lives that are going to be changed. It feels almost overwhelming. You did this, Nicholas said, wrapping an arm around her waist. You created something that's going to outlive both of us, that's going to matter to people we'll never meet. That's a pretty incredible legacy. We did this, she corrected. It wouldn't exist without you. It wouldn't exist the way it does without you. I just wrote the check. You gave it a soul. They were interrupted by Patricia calling up that there was an issue with the electrical plans, and Brianna reluctantly pulled away from Nicholas's embrace to deal with it. But she carried the warmth of his words with her for the rest of the day. That evening, Nicholas picked her up in his car, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Where are we going? Brianna asked, noting his formal attire, a dark suit she'd never seen him wear before. You'll see. It's a surprise. He took her hand and squeezed it, and she noticed his palm was slightly sweaty. Are you okay? You seem anxious. I'm perfect, just excited. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. Trust me, always. They drove to a part of the city Brianna didn't recognize, eventually pulling up outside an elegant building with ornate architecture. Nicholas helped her out of the car, and she realized they were at some kind of private club. Inside, they were led through a series of stunning rooms filled with art and antiques, finally arriving at a rooftop terrace that had been transformed into something out of a dream. String lights crisscrossed overhead, and candles flickered on every surface. A table for two sat in the center of it all, set with fine china and crystal glasses. Nicholas, Brianna breathed, taking it all in. This is beautiful. What's the occasion? Us, he said simply. 6 months of us. I wanted to do something special. They sat down to an incredible meal, but Brianna barely tasted the food. She was too focused on Nicholas, on the way the candlelight played across his features, on the intensity in his eyes every time he looked at her. Something was happening, something important, and her heart was racing in anticipation. After dessert, Nicholas stood and came around to her side of the table. Then, to her shock, he dropped to one knee. Brianna Torres, he began, and his voice was steady even though his hands were shaking slightly. 6 months ago, I tried to grab a coffee and accidentally found the love of my life instead. You've changed everything for me. You've made me laugh and challenged me and inspired me to be better. You've shown me what it means to build something that really matters, not just buildings but a life, a future, a family. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Brianna's breath caught in her throat. I know it's fast, Nicholas continued. I know people will say we should wait, that we barely know each other. But I know everything I need to know. I know that I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I know that I want to support your dreams and celebrate your victories and hold you through the hard times. I know that you're my person, the one I've been waiting for without even realizing I was waiting. He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring and emerald-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones, elegant and timeless. Will you marry me, Brianna? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you're the only right one for me? Tears were streaming down Brianna's face, and she was nodding before she could even form words. Yes, she finally managed to choke out. Yes, of course, yes. Nicholas slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled her into a kiss that felt like a promise and a beginning all at once. Around them, she heard applause and realized that their families were there, her parents and sister, Nicholas's brother and mother, all emerging from wherever they'd been hiding to witness this moment. "You knew?" she asked her mother through her tears. "He asked for our blessing last week," her father said, beaming. "How could we say no? He loves you so much, Mija." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of hugs and congratulations and champagne toasts. Nicholas kept her close the entire time, his arm around her waist, periodically pressing kisses to her temple like he couldn't quite believe she'd said yes. Later, when they were finally alone in the back of his car heading home, Brianna held up her hand to watch the ring catch the light. "I can't believe you did all this," she said softly. "It was perfect. You're perfect." Nicholas laced his fingers through hers. "I meant every word, you know. You're the only person I want, the only person I need. I'm going to spend the rest of our lives making sure you never doubt that." "I don't doubt it," she said, leaning over to kiss him. "I love you, Nicholas Hayes. I can't wait to marry you." They got married 6 months later in a ceremony that somehow managed to be both intimate and grand. Brianna wore a dress her mother had helped her choose, simple and elegant with lace sleeves. Nicholas cried when he saw her walking down the aisle, and she cried too, overwhelmed by the joy and certainty of it all. The Hayes Community Center opened 2 weeks before their wedding, and Brianna insisted on doing the final walkthrough on what was supposed to be her wedding planning day. "This is insane," Sophie said, trailing after her through the building. "You're getting married in 2 weeks and you're checking ceiling tiles." "I need to make sure everything is perfect," Brianna insisted, running her hand along the wall of the library. Sunlight streamed through the floor to ceiling windows just as she'd envisioned. "This matters." "I know it matters, but so does your wedding, and your fiancé is probably wondering where you are." As if summoned, Nicholas appeared in the doorway, looking amused. "I had a feeling I'd find you here. I'm sorry. I know we're supposed to be meeting with the florist, but I just wanted to." "It's okay," he said, crossing the room to take her hands. "I get it. This is your baby. Our baby, really. It deserves your attention." They walked through the center together, and Brianna felt a swell of pride at what they'd created. Kids were already using the space, their laughter echoing through the halls. The gymnasium was hosting a basketball clinic. The kitchen was teaching cooking classes. The garden was growing herbs and vegetables under the care of eager young gardeners. "We did good," Nicholas said quietly, watching a group of teenagers clustered around a computer in the library. "We did great," Brianna corrected. "Look at them. Look at what's possible now because of this place." "Because of you," he said, turning to face her. "I keep trying to tell you that you're the magic ingredient here, but you never believe me." "Maybe I'm starting to," she admitted. "A little bit, anyway." Their wedding was held at the same rooftop terrace where Nicholas had proposed, surrounded by everyone they loved. Brianna's sister was her maid of honor, and Nicholas's brother stood up as his best man. Patricia cried during the ceremony, and Nicholas's mother whispered that she'd never seen her son so happy. When it came time for the vows, Nicholas went first, his voice strong and clear, even though his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Brianna, before I met you, I thought I had everything figured out. I had success and money and a plan for my life. But I was missing the most important thing, someone to share it all with. You've given me that and so much more. You've given me purpose and partnership and a love I didn't know was possible. I promise to support your dreams as fiercely as you support mine. I promise to be your partner in every sense of the word. I promise to love you not just for who you are, but for who you're still becoming. I promise to never stop trying to deserve you." Brianna took a shaky breath before starting her own vows. "Nicholas, I remember the first time I saw you, reaching for that coffee cup at the exact same moment I did. I thought it was a coincidence. Now I think it was fate. You've shown me what it means to be loved completely and unconditionally. You've believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. You've given me the courage to dream bigger and reach higher. I promise to be your safe harbor in every storm. I promise to challenge you and support you in equal measure. I promise to build a life with you that's as strong and beautiful as any building I could design. And I promise to love you forever, starting right now and never stopping. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Nicholas kissed her like they were the only two people in the world, and Brianna felt something click into place in her chest. This was her future, standing right in front of her, and it was better than anything she could have imagined. The reception was a joyous celebration that lasted well into the night. Brianna danced with her father, who told her how proud he was. She danced with Nicholas, who whispered promises in her ear that made her blush. She danced with her sister and Sophie, and even Patricia, who had apparently been won over completely by Nicholas's charm and Brianna's obvious happiness. "You were right," Brianna told Nicholas during a quiet moment, the two of them swaying together while their guests chatted and laughed around them. "That day when I said you had the wrong person, you were right that I was the right one. I knew it from the beginning," he said, spinning her gently. "Sometimes the universe just knows what you need and drops it into your lap in a coffee shop on a random Tuesday morning. Is that what I am? A cosmic coffee delivery? You're everything," he said seriously. "You're my wife, my partner, the love of my life, my everything." She kissed him, soft and sweet, tasting joy and promise and forever. They honeymooned in Italy, spending 2 weeks exploring ancient cities and eating incredible food and making love in hotel rooms with views of the Mediterranean. Nicholas was the perfect travel companion, adventurous and flexible, always ready to follow wherever Brianna's curiosity led them. They got lost in Venice and found a tiny restaurant that served the best pasta she'd ever eaten. They climbed to the top of the Duomo in Florence and watched the sunset paint the city gold. They walked through ruins in Rome and imagined the lives of people who'd lived there thousands of years ago. "I could get used to this," Brianna said one evening, lying on a beach towel beside Nicholas on the Amalfi Coast. The sun was setting, turning the water into liquid fire. "So let's make it a regular thing. Once a year minimum, we go somewhere new together. Deal?" "Deal," she agreed, rolling over to kiss him. "Though nowhere could be better than this. Wait until I take you to Japan or New Zealand or Scotland. There's a whole world out there, Mrs. Hayes." She smiled at the name. "I'm never going to get tired of hearing that." "Good. Because I'm never going to get tired of saying it." When they returned to New York, they moved into a new apartment together, Nicholas's penthouse, which had significantly more space than Brianna's walk-up, but felt empty without her touches. She spent weeks making it theirs, filling it with art and books and photographs, transforming the sleek bachelor pad into a home. Work continued at Hartman and Associates, though Patricia promoted Brianna to senior designer shortly after the wedding, citing her exceptional work on the community center. More projects came her way, more opportunities to create spaces that mattered. And Nicholas was always there, her biggest supporter and most honest critic. A year after their wedding, Brianna found out she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few days but wanted to be sure before telling Nicholas. When the test came back positive, she stood in their bathroom for a full 5 minutes just staring at it, overwhelmed by the enormity of what it meant. Nicholas was in his home office, reviewing contracts, when she walked in carrying the test. "Hey," he said, looking up with a smile that faded when he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," she said quickly. "The opposite of wrong, actually. I have something to tell you." He set down his papers, giving her his full attention. "Okay, what is it?" She held out the test and watched realization dawn across his face. "Are we?" He couldn't seem to form a complete sentence. "We're having a baby," she confirmed, and then she was crying and laughing simultaneously. "I'm pregnant, Nicholas. We're going to be parents." He was across the room in 2 strides, gathering her into his arms and spinning her around. "Oh my God. Oh my God, Brianna. This is incredible. You're incredible. We're having a baby." He set her down carefully, then dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her still flat stomach. "Hey in there," he whispered. "I'm your dad. I can't wait to meet you." Brianna's hands came to rest in his hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "You're going to be an amazing father." "We're going to be amazing parents," he corrected, looking up at her with tears streaming down his face. "Together. Like everything else." The pregnancy was relatively smooth, though Brianna had some rough first trimester days where Nicholas hovered anxiously and tried to anticipate her every need. She continued working as long as she could, determined to finish the design for a new library project before going on maternity leave. They turned one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery, and Nicholas insisted on painting it himself, claiming he wanted to be hands-on from the beginning. They argued playfully about color schemes and furniture, eventually settling on something warm and neutral that would work for any gender. "We could find out," Nicholas suggested during one of her ultrasound appointments. "Whether it's a boy or girl. Do you want to know?" Brianna asked, studying his face. He thought about it for a moment, then shook his head. "I like the surprise. As long as they're healthy, I don't care either way." "Me either," she agreed. "Though my mother is convinced it's a boy, she says I'm carrying the same way she carried me." "Your mother carried you. I thought you were the girl child." "She carried Carmen, I mean. You know what I mean." She swatted his arm and he laughed. The baby arrived on a snowy evening in February, 3 days after Brianna's due date. She'd been in labor for 14 hours, and Nicholas had been by her side the entire time, holding her hand and coaching her breathing, and looking progressively more terrified as things intensified. "You're doing so good, sweetheart," he kept saying, even though he looked like he might pass out. "So strong. Just a little bit longer." "Easy for you to say," she panted, squeezing his hand hard enough that she'd probably bruise him. "You're not the one." Another contraction hit, and she couldn't finish the sentence. But then, after what felt like an eternity, there was a cry, loud and indignant and absolutely beautiful. The doctor held up a squirming, red-faced baby and announced, "It's a girl." "A girl," Nicholas breathed, his voice choked with emotion. "We have a daughter." They placed the baby on Brianna's chest, and she looked down into her daughter's dark eyes and fell in love all over again. The baby's tiny hand wrapped around Brianna's finger, and she felt tears streaming down her face. "Hi, baby girl," she whispered. "Welcome to the world. We're so happy you're here." Nicholas was crying too, his hand gently stroking the baby's head. "She's perfect. She looks just like you." "She has your nose," Brianna observed. "Poor kid," he joked, then leaned down to press a kiss to his daughter's forehead. "I'm your daddy, sweetheart. I'm going to love you and protect you for the rest of my life." They named her Nina Rose Hayes Nina after Nicholas's mother, Rose after Brianna's grandmother. She was a good baby, sleeping in reasonable stretches and only crying when she needed something. Nicholas was a natural with her, changing diapers and warming bottles and walking the floor at 3 in the morning when Nina was fussy. Brianna went back to work after 3 months, though she'd scaled back her hours to part-time. Patricia was understanding, even encouraging, telling her to take whatever time she needed. Nicholas had his assistant block off his afternoons so he could come home and help with Nina, and their penthouse was constantly filled with the sounds of baby babbling and laughter. "I never knew I could love someone this much," Brianna said one evening, watching Nicholas give Nina a bath. He was being so gentle and careful, talking to their daughter in a soft voice about his day. "It's different, isn't it?" he agreed. "I love you with everything I have." But loving her, it's like discovering a whole new capacity for love I didn't know existed. "And somehow it just makes me love you more," Brianna said, Seeing you as a father, you're so good at this." "We're good at this," he said. "The team, remember, that's what we are." Nina grew quickly, hitting milestones with enthusiasm. She rolled over early, then crawled, then pulled herself up on furniture with determination that reminded Brianna of Nicholas. Her first word was "Dada," which Nicholas celebrated with ridiculous enthusiasm, though her second word was "Mama," and Brianna pretended not to gloat. On their third wedding anniversary, Nicholas surprised Brianna with a weekend getaway to the same rooftop terrace where he'd proposed and where they'd gotten married. His mother took Nina for the weekend, and they had 2 full days of just the two of them. "Remember this?" Nicholas asked, standing at the edge of the terrace and looking out at the city lights. "Of course I remember. How could I forget?" She wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her cheek against his back. "Best night of my life. Well, tied with our wedding and Nina's birth." "So top 3. Definitely top 3. He turned in her arms to face her. "I wanted to come back here because I wanted to remind us of what we promised each other. We've been so focused on Nina and work and just getting through the daily chaos. I wanted a moment to pause and remember why we started this in the first place. Because you wouldn't let me steal your coffee," she teased. "Because I saw you and I knew," he said seriously. "I knew you were the one I'd been waiting for, and every day since then has only confirmed that. You're an incredible mother and an amazing architect and the best partner I could ask for. I love you more now than I did when I proposed to you right here 3 years ago. And I'll love you even more 3 years from now, and 3 years after that, and every year for the rest of our lives." "Nicholas," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I love you too, so much. Thank you for choosing me, for seeing me when I didn't think anyone would." "You're impossible not to see," he said, cupping her face in his hands. "You light up every room you walk into, you always have." They danced under the string lights like they had at their wedding, and Brianna rested her head on Nicholas's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. This was her life, this incredible, improbable, beautiful life that had started with a mix-up at a coffee shop and led to everything she'd ever wanted. The years passed in a blur of birthday parties and school plays and family vacations. Nina started kindergarten with the same determination she'd shown as a baby, making friends easily and throwing herself into every activity with enthusiasm. Brianna took on more projects at work, designing everything from schools to medical centers to affordable housing complexes. Nicholas expanded his philanthropic efforts, funding more community centers and scholarship programs and initiatives to support underprivileged youth. When Nina was 5, they decided to have another baby. It took longer this time, months of hoping and disappointment, before Brianna finally saw those 2 pink lines again. This pregnancy was harder than the first, with more morning sickness and fatigue, but it was worth it when their son was born Benjamin Nicholas Hayes, named after Nicholas's father. Ben was quieter than Nina had been as a baby, more content to observe than to demand attention. Nina was instantly smitten with her little brother, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to bottle feeding. "I best help her," she declared seriously, her 5-year-old grammar still a work in progress. "You're the best helper," Brianna agreed, watching her daughter gently pat Ben's back. "He's lucky to have you as a big sister." Their home was chaotic and loud and absolutely perfect. There were toys scattered everywhere and crayon drawings on the fridge, and a schedule on the wall that was constantly being revised. Nicholas had to travel less for work, wanting to be present for every moment he could, and Brianna had gotten better at balancing her career ambitions with her desire to be there for her children. On nights when they managed to get both kids to bed at a reasonable hour, Brianna and Nicholas would collapse on the couch together, exhausted but happy. "Remember when we thought we were busy before we had kids?" Brianna asked one such evening, her head resting on Nicholas's shoulder, vaguely. That was a lifetime ago. He pressed a kiss to her hair. I wouldn't trade this for anything, though. Even when I'm so tired I can't see straight. Me either. This is everything I never knew I wanted. Because you thought you had the wrong person, he reminded her, his voice teasing. And you told me I was the only right one, she finished, tilting her face up to kiss him. You were right, by the way, about everything. The Hayes Community Center thrived, becoming a cornerstone of the neighborhood. They held an event every year on the anniversary of its opening, and Nicholas and Brianna always attended, bringing Nina and Ben to see the impact of their parents' work. Why you build this place? Nina asked when she was 7, walking through the center and looking at everything with curious eyes. Because everyone deserves a place where they can learn and grow and be safe, Brianna explained. Your daddy and I wanted to create somewhere special for kids who might not have a lot of other opportunities. Like a superhero place, Nina said thoughtfully, but for real. Exactly like that, Nicholas agreed, ruffling her hair. You get it. As Nina got older, she started asking more questions about how her parents had met, fascinated by the story of the coffee shop and the mistaken order. So you just took Daddy's coffee? She asked, scandalized and delighted. It was an accident, Brianna insisted. The cups looked exactly the same. And I knew right away that she was special, Nicholas added, winking at his daughter. So I let her have both coffees because I wanted her to have a good day. That's so romantic, Nina sighed, already a precocious romantic at 8 years old. Like a fairy tale. Better than a fairy tale, Brianna said. Because it's real. Ben, who was 3 and mostly interested in trucks and dinosaurs, piped up from his position on Nicholas's lap. Tell the part about the boat. So Nicholas told them about their first real date, sailing on the Thomas Hayes, and Brianna filled in details about the picnic lunch and the champagne and how scared she'd been to take the wheel. But Daddy was right there, she said, looking at Nicholas with all the love she still felt after 8 years of marriage. He wouldn't let me crash. I'll always be right there, Nicholas said quietly, and she knew he wasn't just talking about sailing anymore. Years continued to unfold, each one bringing new challenges and triumphs. Nina developed a passion for art, filling sketchbooks with drawings that showed a natural talent that made Brianna's heart swell with pride. Ben discovered a love of music, and their home was constantly filled with the sound of him practicing piano. Nicholas's business continued to grow, but he never let it take priority over his family. Brianna was promoted to partner at Hartman and Associates, her name added to the letterhead. Through it all, through the chaos of raising kids and managing careers and navigating the complications of life, Brianna and Nicholas's love remained the constant. They still had date nights, still stole moments alone whenever they could. They still talked for hours about their dreams and fears and everything in between. They still made each other laugh and supported each other through hard times and celebrated victories together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nicholas took Brianna back to the coffee shop where they'd first met. It had been renovated since then, modernized and expanded, but it still had the same essential character. I can't believe it's been 10 years, Brianna said, looking around at the familiar space. It feels like yesterday and also like a lifetime ago. A lifetime of good things, Nicholas said, taking her hand. The best things. They ordered vanilla lattes with extra shots, just like that first day, and sat at a table in the corner. Nicholas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box. I got you something, he said, sliding it across the table. Brianna unwrapped it carefully to reveal a beautiful bracelet with 3 charms, a coffee cup, a building, and a heart. The coffee cup for where we met, Nicholas explained. The building for the community center and everything you've built in your career. And the heart for all the love we've shared. Nicholas, she whispered, slipping the bracelet onto her wrist. It's perfect. I wanted you to have something to remind you of our story, he said. of how we started and everything we've become. I know life gets hectic, and we don't always have time to stop and appreciate it, but Brianna, you've given me the most incredible 10 years. You've made me a husband and a father and a better man than I ever thought I could be. I can't wait to see what the next 10 years bring. Whatever they bring, we'll face it together, she said firmly. That's what we do. That's who we are. They clinked their coffee cups together in a toast, and Brianna felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her. This was her life built on a chance encounter and sustained by love and partnership and commitment. She'd started that day 10 years ago thinking she'd grabbed the wrong coffee, and Nicholas had known from the beginning that she was the only right one. He'd been right. About everything. Nina graduated from high school at the top of her class, and Ben wasn't far behind, both kids having inherited their parents' drive and intelligence. Nina went to college for architecture, following in her mother's footsteps, while Ben pursued music composition. Nicholas and Brianna stood together at every graduation and recital and milestone, their hands intertwined, their pride evident. "We did good," Nicholas said at Nina's college graduation, watching their daughter accept her diploma. "We did great," Brianna corrected, using the same words she'd said all those years ago at the community center opening. When Nina got her first job at a prestigious architecture firm, and Ben's composition was performed by a major orchestra, Nicholas and Brianna sat in the audience holding hands, their hearts full to bursting. "You ever think about that day in the coffee shop?" Brianna asked one evening, the two of them alone in their penthouse after the kids had moved out. The space felt too quiet without the constant noise and chaos of children, but also peaceful in a different way. "All the time," Nicholas admitted. "Best coffee mix-up in history." "I was so flustered," she remembered, laughing. "You were this gorgeous, well-dressed man and I was running late and stressed, and all I could think was that I needed caffeine. And all I could think was that I needed to know your name." He pulled her close, and she settled against his side like she'd done thousands of times over the years. "My life changed that day. The whole trajectory of everything shifted because you reached for a coffee cup at the exact same moment I did." "Fate," Brianna said softly. "It had to be fate." "I don't know about fate," Nicholas said. "But I know that I'd go through it all again in a heartbeat. Every moment, every challenge, every beautiful ordinary day. All of it as long as it led me back to you." Years later, when they'd been married for over 3 decades, Brianna still wore that bracelet Nicholas had given her on their 10th anniversary. The charms had gotten a bit worn with time, but she never took it off. They'd added grandchildren to their family by then. Nina had 2 kids, and Ben had 1, and their penthouse was once again filled with noise and laughter during family gatherings. Nicholas's hair had gone silver, and Brianna had laugh lines around her eyes. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they'd been in that coffee shop all those years ago, young and hopeful and falling in love. "I think you have the wrong person," she said one morning, echoing those first words she'd spoken to him, as they stood in their kitchen making coffee together. Nicholas turned to her with the same smile he'd given her that very first day, warm and sure and full of love. "No," he said firmly, pulling her into his arms. "You're the only right one. You always have been. You always will be." And as Brianna kissed her husband of 30-plus years, surrounded by the life they'd built together from a chance encounter, and sustained by love and commitment and partnership, she knew with absolute certainty that he was right. She always had been the right one. And he had been the right one for her. Their love story had started with a coffee cup and a case of mistaken identity, but it had grown into something beautiful and lasting and real. It was a story they told their grandchildren, who listened with wide eyes and asked for it again and again. It was a story that proved sometimes the universe knows exactly what you need, even when you don't know it yourself. And it was a story that ended not with the end, but with "to be continued," because love like theirs doesn't stop. It just keeps growing, keeps evolving, keeps finding new ways to deepen and expand. Brianna Torres and Nicholas Hayes had built a life together that was as solid and beautiful as any building she'd ever designed. They'd created a family, made a difference in their community, and loved each other through everything life threw at them. And it had all started because she'd thought she had the wrong person, and he'd known from the very first moment that she was the only right one. Sometimes the best love stories are the ones that start with a simple misunderstanding and grow into a lifetime of understanding. Sometimes the person you think is wrong turns out to be the one who's perfectly, absolutely right. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you meet your soulmate over a cup of coffee on an ordinary Tuesday morning, and your whole life changes in the most extraordinary way. That was their story. That was their truth. And every day, with every shared glance and gentle touch and whispered, "I love you," they lived that truth together. Forever wasn't just a promise they'd made at their wedding. It was a choice they made every single day, over and over again, to choose each other, to love each other, to be each other's person. And that, more than anything, was what made their love story so beautiful. Not the grand gestures or the romantic proposals or the fairy tale moments, though those were lovely too, but the everyday choice to show up for each other, to support each other's dreams, to build a life together brick by brick, just like the buildings Brianna designed. Solid, lasting, real. The coffee shop where they'd met eventually closed down, replaced by a chain store, but Nicholas bought the original sign and hung it in their home as a reminder of where it all began. Their kids thought it was cheesy. Their grandkids thought it was romantic. Brianna and Nicholas just thought it was perfect, because that's what their life together was: perfectly imperfect, beautifully ordinary, extraordinarily real. They'd taken a chance on each other that day in the coffee shop, and they'd been taking chances on each other every day since. And every single time, it had been worth it. Brianna had thought she had the wrong person. Nicholas had known she was the only right one. And in the end, they'd both been proven right, because what they'd built together was so much more than either of them could have created alone. It was a partnership, a love story, a legacy. It was everything.